Hey everybody, it is OT Steph, and I am starting my weekly Saturday live stream Q&A session. If you can't tell, I recently had a bout of strep throat, so if my voice is a little raspy and crackly, I apologize, but I will do this for as long as I can until, my voice just gives out. Hopefully we get a couple good questions answered today before that happens. I'm going to pop up this disclaimer really quick because I wasn't able to do so right in the beginning. And if you're just tuning in, this is OT Steph. I will be doing a live Q&A session today. Occupational therapy related questions. This should be a weekly occasion every Saturday if possible. So tune in if you have any occupational therapy questions. And let's see, if nobody's got anything for me to start, let me just make sure I can actually see the chat bar. No, 1 second. If nobody has any questions for me to start, I have a couple saved here on my phone that I can start with. That way you guys don't have to listen to me talk about myself. Because I do love to do that. Let's see. Okay. So, my last video last Saturday was another Q&A session. I think it went for almost an hour 20 minutes or so. But I answered 7 questions on there, it was very fun to do. I loved it. But, so what I'd like to do is kind of keep a running tally of all these questions. So since I did 6 questions actually, 6 questions last week, we are going to start with question 7 this week, just to help keep track of all the different questions coming in week by week. And eventually what I'd like to do is cut up these big long hour-long live streams into individual videos, like 1 video per question. So it's just going to help keep everything organized. But one of the first questions that came in that I would like to answer for you guys is what finger grips are best to use for my 3-year-old? And the answer to this question, just like the answer to most medical occupational therapy related questions, isn't as simple as here it is, this is the best one, because it all depends on what the issue at hand is. Now 3 years old is still pretty young. Kids at that age are still kind of figuring out how to properly hold a pencil. By age 4 or 5 is when you're going to want to start seeing, let me grab a pen or a pencil. Age 4 or 5 is when you're going to want to start seeing more of a dynamic tripod writing grip. But as far as age 3 goes, as long as they're still not holding it like this in a gross palmar grasp, you're really okay. You're going to want to see more of this happening where they're turning and they're using their thumb and their index finger to pinch the pencil. And an even better way to see it is to have their thumb and index finger pinch the pencil and to have the upper part of the pencil rest within the web space. I'd be happy to show you guys some grips. As an OT, I do work with pencil grips quite a bit. I do find them fairly helpful. 1 second. See if I can pull some up. I'll show you my favorite kinds to use, but like I said, I still think that 3 years old might be a little young to introduce something like this. I would wait at least another year, and then if they're still struggling, maybe try something like this. So let me pull up a picture really quick for you guys. Ooh, there's a whole bunch. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm just going to pull up this Google Images page. That kind of worked out last time. So here we go. So all I did was type in pencil grips here, and I'm gonna show a couple of these different ones to you, just to kind of explain their purpose and everything. The purpose of the pencil grip, they're all intended to do the same thing, which is to get that dynamic tripod grip of, if you can see my little mouse here, like this person's holding here. Kids may struggle with this when they first pick up a pencil, and like I said, 3 is you're still kind of working on just getting them into this stage where I'm not sure a grip is completely necessary if they're not quite there yet. My favorite type of grip to use is this one right here. It's very simple, it's very versatile, and there's really not a wrong way to use it. I like it because it's more subtle. What it is basically just a triangle that goes over the tip of a pencil. And I wish I had one here to show you guys. But how it works is it kind of forces your, when you're holding your pencil, it's going to force a triangular style of gripping. So one side for your thumb, one side for your index finger. And most children, like, the problems that they end up having is they put more fingers than necessary. But if you've got a tri-grip, that's going to be really difficult for them to do comfortably. So it kind of very subtly just kind of nudges their hand into the correct position. It's not uncomfortable for them to hold. I mean, it may feel a little awkward at first because it's not something we're used to holding, but it is one of my favorite grips. They also make, you can buy pencils, just the pencils themselves, not a grip to go on the pencil, that have 3, like a triangular shape, 3 sides to it. And I know Melissa and Doug is one of the amazing toy brands that I use all the time, but I know they make a set of wax crayons that do the same thing. They're molded into a tri-grip shape, so that's actually one of the best ways to initiate a strong pencil grip, is to have something where the child is doing a lot and applying a lot of pressure for a long period of time. For instance, like coloring with a crayon, because that's going to provide the most input into their hand and then create that habit of holding it that way, even when there isn't the tri-grip there. Let's see. There's a couple other fancy grips. This one's okay. I do have some of these. It's a much more kind of like forceful thing for the child, I feel like. Most of the time when you try and put a child's finger in one of these, they're going to look at you like, really? Or, especially with a nonverbal child who you're trying to, get to have his finger in there, they may just end up taking it out and trying to grip it some other weird way, where with the tri-pencil grip, you don't really even have to tell them how to hold it. You just put it on there and you kind of see that their hand subtly will take the proper formation just because that's what's most comfortable for it. These ones basically just make the pencil a little larger. A larger pencil is always going to be easier to grip because it's going to require less superior pinch strength. I mean, to pinch something here versus pinching it very small down here is much less precision. So this is good if your child is just struggling a little bit mildly, and just to get them used to holding something in their hand in that position before moving down to a regular pencil size. But I know a lot of therapists that use these to the claw grip. This is pretty cool too. The biggest issue I have with these, some of the let's see, like this kind of thing. The biggest issue I have with these is a lot of them are only meant to be held a certain way. So For this, I'm pretty sure it's hard with me looking at it in a picture and not having it in my hand, but one of these grooves is specifically meant for you to rest the knuckle of your third finger, or your middle finger on. And if you have a child struggling to hold a pencil and also struggling with anything else, being able to follow directions, being able to take a verbal cue, which is often the case, at least is often what I see working in a therapy clinic, something like this just isn't going to be as effective because they're going to need that verbal cue on top of holding that pencil. Where this is definitely one of my favorites because I can, like I said, I can just stick it on the pencil, put it in their hand, and I kind of see, it may not happen right away, but slowly they're going to figure out for themselves what the most comfortable way to hold that pencil is, which coincidentally is the way that I would like to see them holding a pencil. But, whoops, wrong screen. I hope that answered your question. Let's see here. If there's anybody in the chat who would like to ask any questions right now. So how this is going to work is I have a couple of questions already lined up. So if nobody's going to ask me anything, if people are going to be shy, that's okay. I'm just going to move down my list of questions that I got throughout the week and answer those. However, if somebody does have a question, please answer. Your question will take precedence over my list since you're here and you're listening, and I want to answer the question that you have. That's why you came, right? It's to learn. So if you have anything, please don't be shy. Please type it in the chat box if you're here and listening. If not, I'm gonna take the stream a little slower because I can already tell my voice is getting there. So I'm going to take my little sip of tea and I'm going to get set up with my next question. Unless somebody sneaks one in there beforehand. Alright, let's see where the next one is. The next question. Should I buy a balance board? Let's save that there. And then I'm putting up the questions that I'm currently answering on the screen. And that way, if you're just tuning in, you don't have to try and rewind the video to figure out what I'm talking about. It should be, I'm going to try, I wasn't as good about it last week. I'm going to try and put it up here as I'm answering the question. Okay, and I'm just, if anybody has anything, please shout it out. Or if there's anything wrong with my audio or my videos not showing up right, please let me know. Occupational therapy, I'm fairly decent at. Technology, on the other hand, is not my strong suit. But that's okay. We'll figure it out together. Alright, so the question, let me just see if anybody else asked anything. Nope. So we're going to move on. Should I buy a balance board? And that, like many of the other questions on here, is a loaded question. So should you buy a balance board? An answer to that could be sure. You should buy a balance board. But what for? What is your intended purpose of using this balance board? Now, as an occupational therapist, I do work with things like coordination and balance and stuff like that. However, the scope, the field which would cover that more in depth and probably be a little bit more knowledgeable about the balance aspect is physical therapy. Physical therapy works with things like walking, mobility, balance, endurance, things like that. That's not to say that I don't work with that and I don't incorporate that into my sessions, because I definitely do. A balance board can come in many different shapes and sizes. Maybe I can show you guys some examples. At the clinic we have several. And before I start talking about them, maybe I can show you. Okay. Switch it over to here. Okay, so depending on what you're using it for, a balance board could be very good at helping someone get better with their balance. There's all different kinds here. There's obviously ones that are extremely difficult. Like, for instance, one of these. This is a balance board, and a lot of times this is a free rolling agent underneath. So you have to balance on top of this wheel here. We actually do not have one of these at the clinic because I feel, I'm not a physical therapist, but I do feel that this would be quite a bit more advanced than a lot of our children could handle. We do have something like this, though, a balance board where you have to, there's only one way for it to go, just tilt back and forth. It's not going to tilt back and forth and roll across a bar. So this one would be a little bit easier even than the last one I showed you. And then there is something called a Bosu ball. This is not a Bosu ball. This is a different brand, but it's the same kind of thing. This also is going to provide the balance aspect of, you know, helping someone practice with their balance. The one we have at the clinic actually has a plastic ball on the bottom, and you can either use it by standing on top of the board, or you could flip it right over and have the child try and balance on the other end of the ball. It is a bit easier for them to balance on the ball itself because it is inflated and their feet can kind of sink into it a little bit, providing them a little extra support. So the most important thing when you're trying to rehabilitate balance is you want to meet the child where they're going to be able to be successful but still provide a challenge for them. So you don't want to throw a child on a very complicated balancing thing and just watch them fall off over and over and over again. You may want to start with something simple like this flipped over with the ball on top. Let me look up Bosu ball because that's what we have, and I do love that thing and use it a lot. There it is. So this is almost exactly the thing we have. And as you can see, you can stand on it, kind of like this guy is doing here, and his feet are sinking into it a little more. But there is still that aspect of shifting your weight, shifting your gravity on it, which is a good place to start. Now, if this is still too difficult for your child, perhaps start by holding their hands and then letting go for a couple seconds at a time, you know, just to give them that sense of weight shift and keeping their balance. The whole point is to work your way up to a balance that is functional, a balance that when you're walking, you don't trip over yourself because your balance is unsteady. Now, oh goodness, there's other things I could say about this question, but it's like I said, every question I get here, it seems like there's so much background information that I could share. For instance, the thing that's coming to mind right now is someone asking a question like this: should I buy a balance board? They're obviously seeing that their child is having some issues maybe with clumsiness. Clumsiness, however, is not always specifically a balance issue. There are sometimes it's more of a sensory issue where a child is seeking input from their surroundings. So instead of, you know, walking a straight line down a hallway, you're going to see them pushing up against the wall for that input into their body, which to you may look like, oh goodness, they're falling over, they need the wall to catch themselves, when in fact they're actually doing that on purpose to receive that input. So balance boards are fun. They're great exercise. They're a good activity for a child who can handle it. So sure, you should buy a balance board, but make sure you're thinking about what you're going to be using that for, and make sure that the issue that you're seeing can actually be rehabilitated by a balance board. And I'm so sorry, my voice is... I'm going to drink a little bit more tea. If you have any questions for me, please type them in. We may end up having to cut this a little bit shorter than last week, and I'm sorry about that, but... Oh, goodness. Okay. Let's see. So, let me set up for my next question, if nobody has anything. Let's see what's on here. What can I do to promote my daughter? Okay. Alright, next question. Oh, sorry guys. Getting over strep throat is not fun. But I'm glad I get to be here with everybody. Okay. So the next question that I have is, what can I do to promote my daughter sitting in a seat? And this is a question that I get a lot of the time at the clinic, specifically when a child is reaching preschool age, or even kindergarten age, where they are expected a lot more than they were before to be able to sit down in a chair, sit down at a table, and stay there for an extended period of time. Depending on the age, my answer to this question would be different. My answer to this question for a 4 or a 5-year-old in preschool or kindergarten, I know the grades may start different at different ages, or in different areas. Here in the U.S., 5 or 6 years old is typical for a child starting kindergarten. But, and this is a bad answer because it's really a non-answer, but age 4, 5, even 6, I almost would say that it's not a child sitting down is the problem. It's our expectation of a child sitting down at age 5 or 6 for extended periods of time. So when a child first enters kindergarten and they're first expected to sit at a chair, at a table, and do table work, a lot of times I know I don't want to bash any school systems or anything like that, but a lot of times that expectation is a huge one for a child that young, with that much energy, that much curiosity about the world, everything. So at that age, I typically like to, and I encourage teachers in schools, when I used to do rotations at the school district, that was a big push, was having more motion involved in classroom activities. Not just doing seated work, but having floor time, even just moving from the chair to a floor between activities could provide enough movement to keep your child regulated enough to be able to focus and stay calm. As far as in the clinic, around those ages, I typically let the child, as long as they're at the table, I'm not as concerned if their butt is in the seat versus them standing at the table and actually being engaged in what we're doing and everything. I would hope that a kindergarten classroom teacher would feel the same way. I don't know if they would or not, but once you're getting into the older grades, first, second, third grade, if this is still becoming an issue, This is just something that needs to be worked on. So just like when you go to the gym and you exercise your muscles, they get stronger, they gain ability that they didn't have before. The same is going to be said for attention. So you want to start in small increments. So if your child is able to sit in a chair for 2 minutes, and that's, at that point, that's all they can do, see if you can get them to sit there for 2 minutes and 10 seconds, and then give them a break. And then next time try 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and then so on and so forth, building your way up to 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever that expectation is for your classroom. And break it down into smaller pieces. Don't ever have your child just sit and say, okay, you need to sit here, for this extended period of time, when they're obviously not capable of handling that, because that's going to frustrate them. And even if they are sitting, if you have a child who is sitting, in their chair, not fidgeting, not anything, but because they're sitting there, they've got all this pent-up energy, and they can't focus on the classroom task. How is that any better than a child who might be standing or kind of bouncing, but they're actually absorbing the information? I feel like as long as they're not being disruptful to the class, you should be able to allow for some kind of movement and things like that. Those terrible, those fidget spinners that all the kids are playing with, that is a movement activity. It is visually stimulating, it is tactile stimulating, they can move, they can play with it, and unfortunately things like that turn into a phenomenon where every child wants one. But for some kids, they actually do have a lot of benefit in that they are able to get out that energy, they are able to stimulate themselves so that they can better take in the information that is within the classroom. They don't have all that pent-up energy that's just kind of, festering inside them that doesn't allow for them to focus. So some other solutions I've had for older children who have a more hyperactive tendency is, here, let me show you. I'm sure I can find a picture of it. There we go. So there's a thing called Theraband it's kind of like the exercise tube bands that you hang over the door and you do the resistance training with. It's basically like a giant stretchy rubber band. A lot of times, and something I've seen work wonders for kids, is if you take a piece of this Theraband and just tie it around the bottom of this is a classroom chair, I'm not sure what grade this is, but tie it around the bottom of their chair. So that way when they're sitting there, if they have extra energy, they don't have to stand up to use it. They can sit there and kick at that Theraband. I don't know why I'm kicking. I know you can't see my feet, but here's an example of a child using it. Just kicking at that Theraband. It is silent. It shouldn't bother the class as long as, the chair and the desk are secured down enough where it's not moving them around. I don't like this one as much because it's connected to the desk, whereas if it's connected to the chair, there's much less of a chance that it's going to end up moving around. But this will definitely help support your child's attention in class and help them get out some of that energy while still being able to sit and not be disruptive at the same time. This is actually a beautiful picture here. This is another thing I was actually just going to start speaking about. It is a chair pad. Oh, goodness. It's basically a sensory chair pad. I know there is a more technical name for it, and I apologize that I cannot think of it at this moment in time, but basically what it is it's a cushion where you've got some tactile sensory input. They make all different styles, ones with bubbles, ones with spikes, and they're inflated. So your child can sit there kind of like on this inflated little cushion, and it'll shift their weight around like this. And that's also silent. It may be a bit more distracting for the other children to see a child kind of wiggling in their seat like this, but I still think that the benefits outweigh the downfalls there. If your child is able to sit in something like this, even this setup where both is going on, where it's going to support their attention, it's going to allow them to move, it's going to allow them the energy output they're looking for, while still allowing them to be seated in a silent and mostly non-disruptive way. These are really good tools for them to use. Now, if you're talking about in a school classroom, the biggest issue that comes up with all of these fun gadgets is one child sees another child have this cool Theraband thing around the legs of their chair, and they're sitting on this cool cushion. And of course, what child isn't going to want the inflatable sensory wedge or seat, I guess is what you would look up to find these. But what child is going to see that and be like, oh yeah, that's fine, he can have that, I don't want one? No, of course, every child who sees that is going to be like, hey, Jimmy gets one of those, how come I don't too? And that's obviously going to put a stress on the classroom, because depending on, supplies, if it's limited or if it's something that the parent brought in for the child to use, then you've got the issue of children asking to borrow it from your child, asking to play with it temporarily, where now it's become a novelty type of toy instead of the therapeutic tool that it was intended for. And, I empathize with teachers with the struggle. I definitely do. They have to deal with a lot, especially in a multiple child classroom and everything. So the OT answer, my answer for these kind of questions, isn't always the most practical. It is the one that, physiologically and coming from a sensory standpoint makes sense. However, in a classroom of 30 kids, you give one of the kids these toys. Is that going to cause a bigger disruption for everybody, including the child, than it would to help the child? And that is something you would have to discuss with your child's teacher and see if, this is something they would be able to work in, or, just to test it out, see if it's going to make any difference. So yeah, in a school setting, it's tough. Now, if you're talking about just, sitting down to go see a movie or sitting down, something like that, yeah, try it out. I mean, it's not going to harm anything. It might help your child get out some of that energy while they're sitting. But in a school setting, it's always going to be a little bit more difficult. There's going to be a little bit more red tape to go through, things like that. So I did want to mention that even though I know what I would like to see happen, I am also not in that classroom, the whole day with all of the kids, dealing with the problems and the situations that arise from that. So I just have to keep that in mind, and I urge parents to keep that in mind as well. Okay, another quick tea break. And it looks like I have a question coming in, a live question, so I will get to that in just a second. I'm sorry, guys. I was diagnosed with strep throat 2 days ago, and although that antibiotic did a really good job and I'm feeling so much better, apparently it took a toll on my throat a little bit. So I'm hanging in there. Alright. So I have a live question coming in. Let me just pop it up here real quick. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. Okay. Give me 1 second, guys. Alright, so I just got the question. 3-year-old 3-year-old son with autism can use his finger on the iPad to do ABCs, but will not use a pencil. Any tips? This is actually a lot more common than you might think. In the world of growing touchscreens and tablets and things like that, children are usually first exposed to a screen that they can touch with their finger versus, having to color on a piece of paper with a marker or crayon. So this is their first actual form of pre-writing, drawing, tracing, tapping, things like that. So it makes sense that once they become accustomed to using one pointer finger to do a lot of the things, when you try and translate that to a pencil and paper, it's a lot different. So when you think about it, when you're holding a pencil, the pencil is actually just an extension of your hand. It's not the hand itself. It doesn't offer quite as much control as using a regular finger would be. That may not be the case for an adult who's been writing for a while and who has developed a very neat dynamic tripod grip. But for a child who's first using to use one of these, it's pretty foreign to them. My biggest suggestion for that would be, and I have one here, but if I don't, I'll show you guys on the internet. So, one second, let me pull it up. So they make what's called a Stylus for iPads, tablets, things like that. And it basically takes the same shape as a pencil. It's got the elongated shape. The tip is just soft so that when you apply it to a touch screen, the touchscreen registers it almost as like a finger touch, except it's still a tool. It's still a writing tool like a pencil. So what I have done with children who, come in and I'll show them the iPad to see if they're able to trace. And they show me, oh yeah, I can trace beautifully. Look, I can write a letter, I can draw a square. But then when they do it on paper, it's not quite as easy for them. It's not as clean looking. Then I know it's not a visual motor problem. It's not the fact that they can't see the letter or they don't know how to form the letter or, they're unable to follow a tracing line. It's the fact that their hand isn't used to gripping a pencil. So where I like to start with that is putting one of these in their hands. And usually they look at me like, what is this? This is kind of silly. Like, why do I have to use this? I can just use my finger. So what I will do, instead of starting them out on a super educational program that maybe they only do because mom says they have to, I will start them off on one of their, favorite games. Something they really enjoy, something they kind of get lost in. And I'll kind of sneak that stylus in there and I'll be like, here, try it with this, And a lot of times they're so engrossed in the application or the program or the game that their mind is more focused on the game than it is focused on using this foreign object. Which is kind of what you want. That's kind of how you want to develop a habit. If you're doing something subconsciously, it almost gets more inputted in the back of your mind, if that makes sense, because you're not focused on trying to hold the pencil, you're focused on the game, yet you're still holding the pencil. So it just kind of becomes a natural feeling to you. Now for 3 years old, as long as he's not holding a pencil like this with a gross palmar grasp, I would say he's still okay at this point. For 3 years old, you're going to want to see him turning and grasping that pencil with his finger and his thumb like this, or what's even better is finger and thumb with the rest of the pen resting in the web space like this. Now, if you're seeing a grasp like this with multiple fingers, what that is usually a compensation for is a weak pinch strength. So between these two fingers is where you want to see most of the strength of holding that pencil come in. And then it'll rest across the first joint of your middle finger. But when your pinch strength here isn't strong enough, you end up compensating with your other fingers to get a better hold on that pencil. So one of the things I like to work on with kids, is to try and make their fingers a bit stronger, so when they're holding that pencil, it doesn't feel so, that's not what I wanted. It doesn't feel so foreign to them. It doesn't feel so weak. The analogy I like to give is if someone told you to pick up a 50-pound ball and throw it into a hole 3 feet in front of you, that might be rather difficult for you. I mean, or if you're really strong, up the weight, say 100-pound ball, 150-pound ball, you're going to struggle, picking up that ball and precision throwing it somewhere, or doing anything precision with it, really. Unless, someone handed you a 5-pound ball and asked you to do the same thing. Now, you're strong enough where you can manipulate that ball without having to utilize the maximum of your strength, so the precision gets a lot better. The same goes for holding a pencil. If you're spending most of the time just kind of really putting that effort into just holding that pencil between your fingers, the precision isn't going to be as accurate. So the fix for that is to try and strengthen your pinch grasp so that when you're holding that pencil, you can get more precision with it and make leaner lines and be able to have more control over what you're writing. And there's lots of ways to work on pinch strength. And one of my favorite ways, and I just posted a picture of this earlier on Facebook, but I'm not sure if I could pull up that picture from here. Clothespins. So let's switch over to here. Any activity where your child is going to need to do a repetitive pinch. So these are super cute. I've made these before. The little alligator toy crafts where to open the alligator's mouth you have to pinch and close it. You can make this an educational activity by having them match up, certain letters or certain colors with the clothespins. The activity I posted earlier, I just like to use kind of like this paper plates where I will write the alphabet and I'll have them either match the letters or I'll have them match uppercase letters to lowercase letters. Or you could do math problems, 2 times 2, what's the answer, write it on the clothespin, they have to match it. So it doesn't have to be just a pinching activity. You can turn it into whatever kind of learning activity is appropriate for your child's age. I wouldn't, expect a child in the 4th grade who is, is reading and doing math but has a low pinch strength to match A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They're gonna look at you and be like, why are you having me do this? So, there's lots of inexpensive, cheap, easy things you can do, tools you can make for them, but make sure it's appropriate for their age level and motivating to them, because if you're giving them a baby toy, they're going to treat it like a baby. They're going to treat the task itself like it's a baby activity, and they're not going to get as much out of it as if they would if they were actually using their mind at the same time they were using their pinch. So I hope some of that helped, and I don't mean to say that tablets and iPads are a bad thing. As an occupational therapist, I always prefer to use actual manipulatives like blocks and toys where they have to manipulate. However, iPads can be a good way to teach different things. I use them to teach like letter tracing, things like that. That can sometimes be hard to replicate on a piece of paper unless you have just an unlimited supply of paper at your fingertips. But putting a stylus in their hand over having them use their finger, I think you'll definitely see some improvement there in their ability to then translate that skill of writing the letter to a paper. Looks like there's a little bit of follow-up on that. Let me read this for a second. Okay. So, we have another question coming in. I hope I answered your question of the iPad and the pencil, Mandy. I think what I'm going to do, I see the new question that came in. I am just going to take a quick break, rest my voice for just maybe 1 minute, drink some tea, get the question set up, and I will be right back to provide an answer for that. Okay, so don't go anywhere. I promise I will be right back. I'm just going to drink some warm tea and give my voice a chance to catch up, okay? So, thank you. Okay, guys, I am back. I am sorry about that. And the next question that just came in is a very good one, and also a very common one, and unfortunately, a very hard situation and a hard problem to deal with, which unfortunately a lot of these things, these issues that these kids are having, there is no quick, easy fix for a lot of these things. Sometimes it just takes repetition and work and consistency on the part of the professionals working with the child and on the part of the parents too. So the question basically is about a nonverbal child who has sensory issues. He's hyposensitive. And when something happens that upsets the child, for the example she gave was if a commercial comes on while his TV program is on, he has a meltdown, he throws things, he screams, he tantrums, he kicks, things like that. So there is a whole lot of stuff going into this question. First of all, the hyposensitivity. I'll explain that a little bit. So when you're talking about a sensory processing disorder, there's two ends of the spectrum. There is hyposensitivity and hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity would be like all of the... It's usually... Okay, let me back up a little bit. In the sensory system, you have a whole bunch of different senses. There's sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. There's also things like proprioception, vestibular input, Those are some of the more complicated ones, and I don't think for the sake of this question we need to get into those. But the sensory system is very complex. And when you have a sensory processing disorder, basically what it means is the sensory information that your body is receiving, by the time it gets to your brain, there's a mix-up, there's a processing error, where typically, when I see a brown couch in, regular daytime lighting, it just looks like a brown couch. But someone with a sensory processing disorder, the light might be really bright, or it might not be bright enough. That information is getting skewed somehow through the vision sense. So there's two ends of the spectrum. Like I said before, there's hyposensitive and hypersensitive. And when you have a sensory processing disorder, wouldn't it be so simple if a child who has hypersensitivity for all of the different senses? Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. A child could be hypersensitive with vision and visual stimuli, but hyposensitive to sound and noises and things like that. And I'll explain a little bit about what those two words mean. So, hypersensitive means overly sensitive. Hyper usually means over or big or exaggerated. So, someone who is hypersensitive to cold may go out on a 60-degree day where other people may be comfortable in just pants and a shirt, and that person may feel the need to dress up in winter hats, scarves, clothes, because that cold is providing more sensory input than it would to someone who has a typical sensory reaction to that cold. So hyper means everything is just more. The lights are brighter. The sound is louder. By the time it gets to their brain, everything is coming in a lot more intense than what, a typical person may be experiencing the same thing. Hyposensitive is just the opposite. So a hyposensitive child to sensory input is not getting enough. The light might not be bright enough by the time it reaches their brain, or when they touch hot plate, it might not feel hot to them. The touch of their sensory is off. It's hypo-responsive, meaning it's not providing enough input. Now, what can be difficult to understand is, well, you have two children there. They're both experiencing the exact same thing. They're side by side. How come one child is overreacting and the other child isn't? And that's what it's part of the way your brain processes it. It's not the way that your body experiences it. They may be having the same exact body experience, but by the time it reaches their brain, there's a mix-up. And it's either amplified or it's not enough. So that's the difference between those two. And in this question, she says her child is hyposensitive. I don't know exactly which sensations he's hyposensitive to. It could be anything. When he hears a loud noise, he may need to cover his ears. Bright lights or visual stimulation, he may not be able to look exactly at a TV. I've seen it where children, when they watch a screen, they'll kind of try and see it out of their periphery, so it's not so visually stimulating to them. So it's not so much information coming in that it's actually, causing them discomfort rather. So when you've got that going on, wait a minute. I said that wrong. Hyposensitive. So that would be the opposite. It wouldn't be covering your ears. That would be hypersensitive to sound. Hyposensitive would be if your child was seeking sounds. I'm so sorry about that. So in a hyposensitive child, that might be the child that you see them putting their ear right up to the speaker to hear it louder, or they're sitting really super close to the TV to get more visual input, or you see them kind of bumping into walls as they walk to get more input of the touch and the proprioception, or they might even be spinning or bouncing to get more of the movement activity, more of that sensory input into their brain, because the way their brain processes it, it's just not enough. So that's hyposensitive. So a lot of times when a child is hyposensitive, think of it as they're kind of like lost in their body because they're not, the world is around them, but their sensory system is not providing enough input from the world, whether it's hearing, taste, touch, smell, vision, all that stuff. So it's kind of like being closed in a dark room or a dark box. And if you want to experience the world, you have to really experience it. You have to touch things hard in order for you to register that they're there. Or you have to see a lot of light in order for you to actually take in what you're looking at. That kind of thing. So you have a child that's going, yep, he seeks more and is more rough and is hypo. So that's exactly what I was saying. He's seeking. He may throw himself on the ground or throw himself at other kids or play really rough, have a hard time calibrating how hard he's doing things because he is seeking that input from his world. Because by the time that input reaches his brain, it's very diluted. It's softened for him. So that's why you might see a lot of the time him lashing out like really expressively or even screaming. I've seen children just scream because they wanted that input to their ears. They wanted to hear, and they provide it for themselves as a comfort. So at times when you see a child tantruming, and I'm not saying this is the case, this is definitely not the case for any tantruming child, but there are times when a child will throw a fit and tantrum and throw things and throw his body into stuff and knock stuff over and scream and cry because he is seeking that input. It's not always I'm upset, give me what I want. Sometimes it's I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable in my own body right now and I don't know what to do about it except for to throw this pillow really hard because that's going to give me some input into my arms, or to punch something really hard because that's going to give me the input that I need and be destructive. And then there's the other aspect of it where it could very well be a behavior thing. He may be very upset that his program turned off, and he may be tantruming just like a child without sensory issues. I'm sure you've all gone to the grocery store before and seen a child having a meltdown, in the shopping cart, screaming, throwing things out of the cart, and the poor mother, she just looks like, she's ready to quit. Does that mean that child has sensory issues? Absolutely not. Children have a hard time, especially at the younger ages, 2, 3, 4. 4 is pushing it a little bit, but when they realize that they can't always, that's when they really start to learn that the world has boundaries, that, their parents have boundaries, and they start to push those boundaries. They want to see how far they can get. They're very egocentric. A lot of it is about me, what can I have? Why can't I have the thing that I want right now? That doesn't make sense to them, that's not an option or a possibility. So they will lash out. They will test your boundaries. They will try and tantrum. The worse they throw a fit, they'll see if they can get you to give in and give them what they want. It's basically a test. So in that case, I would say for a behavior issue of tantruming, for a child who just wanted something and couldn't have it or didn't get their way, the absolute best thing you could do is to ignore them. And I know that can sound funny, but if that is really what they want, if getting what they want is their top priority for them, then any kind of reaction from you, whether it's yelling at them or whether it's trying to calm them down or being empathetic, like, oh, what's the matter kind of thing, they're still getting that attention and they are still able to realize that what they're doing is causing a change in what you're doing. It's causing a response from you, which is exactly what they want. When they throw the stuff out of the cart in the store, they want you to get upset and pick it up and give them what they want, so they stop doing it. That's why they continue to do it, because they want what they want. They don't, their minds don't go beyond that. So the best thing you could do is just to have a completely flat affect. You threw the thing on the floor, okay. Maybe pick it up, put it back on the shelf. Try and get them in a place where they can't be destructive. I know ignoring something is not always going to be practical. For instance, if a child is being destructive to a point where they're going to hurt someone, hurt themselves, damage property. So if your child is having a tantrum like this, and it's possible to move them to a location where, maybe a toy room or something like that, where they wouldn't be able to do that much destruction or anything like that, just let them tantrum, let them have it out, and don't react, don't respond. Just basically pretend that what they're doing has no consequence, no bearing on you right now. And they're eventually going to realize that what they're doing, it's not going to get them what they want. And once they do calm down, and once they are able to approach you, whether they're verbal or nonverbal, I think you can always tell the difference between when a child is upset and tantruming and throwing stuff versus calm and ready to come to you and be like, maybe not verbally, but come to you in a calm manner and approach you like, okay. That's when you want to give them the attention. That's when you want to give them the praise, once they're in a calm state. And that's going to provide almost like a conditioning for them, like, I get this empathetic, this cuddling, this praise from being calm and being, in a calm state, versus I get the attention I'm seeking from screaming and throwing things, which is just, it's setting the wrong idea in their head. Like I said, this is much, much, much easier said than done. I've been around many tantruming children, and it is very difficult to just sit there while they tantrum. But that is really the best way. The positive reinforcement is always going to be better than a punishment. And I'm not saying don't discipline your child. Some children definitely need discipline, things like that. Whatever kind of discipline you use, that's up to you. If you take something away or impose timeout, that kind of thing. But positive reinforcement, so giving them praise and giving them attention, affection, rewards for doing something good is always going to leave a stronger impact and a longer lasting impact than a punishment or a negative reinforcement or taking something away for the positive. So to deal with a behavior, that's usually the best way to go about it. And the thing with that too is sometimes that gets worse before it gets better. So when you start trying to ignore the tantrums and things like that, you may see your child start to tantrum more and start to tantrum louder and they're trying to push that boundary more. They knew last time that they screamed and cried, you went over and you gave them a hug. This time you're not doing it. So now what do they need to do to get that? Maybe they need to throw something off the wall, or maybe they need to come over and hit you or something like that. So they may push even harder because they're not getting that response that they want. But as long as they are safe and the people they are around are safe and they're not damaging, any, valuable property, just let it get worse. Let it get worse and show them that you aren't going to give in until they are able to calm down and approach you in a calm manner. That's a way to deal with behavior. However, when you have a child who's got the sensory issues going on and they've got a behavior going on, which definitely sounds like the case in this situation, as he he has these tantrums, when he is upset about something external going on in his life. You have to kind of navigate your own way of doing it. So if you're seeing things, the hypo, if you're seeing things like the rough play, or, wanting to push into pillows or things like that, provide him with an activity that he's getting that same input, but in a safe manner. So if you see him, knocking into stuff or throwing stuff off the wall, instead have a couch pillow war on the floor or something. Let him have that input in a safe way. Show him it's okay to get these sensory inputs, but in a way that's not going to harm him or someone else. Now, if you're noticing it's a behavior, which basically is, no, I wanted that and I wanted that now, and it's not a sensory thing, that's when you would want to use the ignoring approach. So it's really, you have to keep an eye out. One tip I always give is, if your child is seeking a sensory input, so if your child really needs to listen to something loud right now, and they're screaming and they're screaming and they're screaming, if you provide loud music through headphones or something like that, they are always going to want to take it, because that is going to feed them. Now, if you try and provide a sensory solution to something they're having and they don't want it, they're like, no, don't give me the headphones, I just want to scream, that is an indication that it is just a behavior, and they are screaming to get what they want, not because they need that sensory input. So if you offer them the sensory input and they're still continuing on with the tantruming, the screaming, the behavior, the throwing things, at that point you want to take a step back, remove yourself, ignore what's going on until they're able to calm down. I hope that answered your question a little bit. That is probably one of the toughest things that dealing with a child who isn't able to tell you in that moment what they're feeling or what they're thinking or what they want. There are different ways to I'm going to have to move on to the next question in a minute, but there are different ways to communicate with your child, even if it's not verbal. Just a quick tip, and I'm sure, in the future I'll make a longer video about this or something, but if you have a smartphone, a phone that takes pictures, things like that, go around your house, take pictures of your child's favorite activities, your child's favorite food, different routines that you do with your child, like a picture of the bed for bedtime, or a picture of the sink for brushing teeth, things like that, and communicate with your child through these pictures. So start having them associate, okay, it's bedtime, show them the picture of the bed, point to it, have them point to it. Yes, that's what that means, this is bedtime. When your child is wanting something from you and can't tell you, see if you can teach them how to point to something that they want. I use picture schedules in my clinic all the time, where I just have pictures of all of my different activities, and I'll have the child point to what they want if it's time for them to choose an activity, or if I already have a plan, I'll actually put the pictures in a little row in a little schedule to give them an idea of what's coming first, what's coming next, have them have a little bit more of, or rather less anxiety about what's coming, because imagine you can't speak and you may not be able to understand the people around you. You don't ever know what's really coming next, especially when you're a child and your whole world is controlled by adults. They put you in a car seat, get in the car, but you don't know where you're going. Using pictures to communicate with your child can kind of help alleviate some of that anxiety and that stress for them, and you might see a reduction in some of the behaviors because of it. So hopefully that helped. I see you said thank you. You're welcome. I'm hoping to get up much more videos about this kind of stuff. It's a huge topic, especially to try and answer a lot of stuff in such a short period of time. But hopefully I kind of brushed the surface a little bit, gave you a little bit of advice. I think I am going to take one more question, and then I think my throat may be done for today. But thank you so much for joining, guys. I'm having a good time, and I hope that you're finding this stuff helpful. Please like Raising Beautiful Little Minds Facebook page. I will be doing a live stream here every Saturday, most Saturdays. I also have a Facebook page, OT Steph, and a YouTube channel, OT Steph, if you'd like to head on over there. The whole spiel, like, comment, subscribe, whatever people tell you to do. Just for more updates. It's kind of a slow start right now, but it should be picking up pretty soon. So if you want to head over there, give it a like, give it a subscribe. You should see more good stuff in the future. And I have another question from Carol, which I will answer in just a moment. Please excuse me, I'm going to take another quick little break. I'm going to finish off my tea. I'm going to get the question set up, and I will be right back. Don't go anywhere, okay? Thank you, guys. All right, and we should be back. This will likely be my last question, just to preserve a little bit of the voice that I have left. Tune in next week, Saturday. There should be a much better voice coming out of me, and even more answers, more tips, more advice for people who want to come on and ask questions. Even if, you asked a question today, you think of a new one during the week, shoot me a message on Facebook. My Facebook is OT Steph, or join me for the live stream. Ask your questions in the chat. It was a lot of fun for me, so I hope you guys are getting something out of this too. So the last question we have sort of piggybacked off of the previous question, and I touched on a little bit of information that I think might be helpful. But one of the things this mentions is toys, the sensory toys. So I did want to talk about that a little bit. Sensory toys can be an amazing thing for children. Like I talked about before, when they are used in the proper way, they can provide lots of input to a child who is seeking that input. The child seeking touch or seeking movement or seeking something visual, like something spinning or that lights up. A sensory toy can provide that for them to help them regulate their body and then be able to better function, better focus on whatever the task is that they're doing. So I'm just going to switch over to here a little bit to show you guys some examples of some sensory toys. This isn't all of them, of course, but this is just some examples. You can see there's little cush ball toys that are going to provide a different sensation to their hand that's going to feed their tactile system, the spiky ball. There's toys that light up that will provide input to their visual system, toys that are just visually interesting to watch, things like that. These little fidgets where they're able to move them around that provide the movement. I'm sure I'm surprised it didn't show up on this page, but the fidget spinners, things like that. The question specifically said that, these toys are something that their child seeks. They are sensory seeking, which is that hypo-responsive that I was talking about. Their sensory system isn't processing things. I don't know why my video is showing up on... Oh, yes I do, sorry. Their sensory system is processing things not magnified enough for them. So they're always seeking more to help regulate their system. So, for a child like that, having their own toy, their very own toy that they can take with them, may be a good idea. Classrooms and stuff, I think they're starting to have a lot more sensory toys, things like that available to the children. But if your child is really seeking this out and you notice that there is a difference when they are using it, I would suggest getting them their very own toy that they can have, that they don't have to share, and maybe not even calling it a toy, but instead calling it their tool or their buddy, their helper, because it helps them focus. And then, give them tools and things that they're able to say or do if another child asks if they can play with their toy. Say, it's really not my toy, this is my tool, and I'm not allowed to let people borrow it, or that kind of thing, if they are verbal. Or just let the teacher, whoever is in charge of the child at the time, know that, this is not a toy, this is to help your child stay regulated. And if they can allow them to have access to that toy as often as possible. I know it's not always practical to have a spinny, wind-up, lighty thing going off all the time, all hours of the day in the classroom. I know that. And that's my OT side, the ideal situation versus the practical world. But, even just having that conversation with the teacher, with the daycare supervisor, is there any way my child can get a break, every half an hour or so to play with this toy? Or will you allow them to have this toy during this type of activity that, is really understimulating for them because it's going to help them focus? Have these conversations. Definitely advocate for your child if this is something that's going to help them, because to them, if that's what they're seeking and it's providing that input, it's not just a toy at that point for them. That is helping keep them regulated. It is helping keep them comfortable on the inside so that they are able to function better on the outside. And having another child come up and take that away from them is different than having to share a toy. You're taking away their comfort. You're taking away their ability to function in the world. So if you're able to, like I said, it's not always the most practical solution, but if you, as much as you can apply it, I think it's a good idea. The sensory breaks are something that I've seen applied a lot in children's IEPs. I don't know if that's only a U.S. thing, an individualized education plan. Basically, when a child needs provisions or adaptations made to the classroom in order to help them learn and grow, it is added in what's called an individualized education plan. And the teachers, the teacher aides, the parapros, they're supposed to, know about these provisions and make sure that child is receiving them. For instance, if a child is highly distractible to noises and stuff during class, and they have a provision written in their IEP saying, they should be allowed to wear noise canceling headphones whenever they take a test. Then they're supposed to ensure that they provide those noise canceling headphones whenever they take a test. You can also advocate for something called sensory breaks. So, and I mean, that's a negotiation between you, the teacher board, the therapists working with your child, how often and what type. So some children may be just fine, once every 45 minutes going for a quick walk up and down the hallway as a sensory break, because it's providing them that movement and that release of energy, and then they can come back and sit down. And it's also not disruptive. I've also seen a sensory break just being, some time to go in the corner of the room to watch a quick video or to play with a cush ball or something like that, something that's going to give them that input so that they can kind of help regulate themselves for the next 45 minutes of classroom activity work. And like I said, that's, I don't know where you're from, so I don't know how the school system works or how much, collaboration there is between a parent and a child and the teachers and what they allow and that kind of thing. But if you can advocate for that kind of thing for your child, that would be ideal. Oh, he's little and not in school yet. Well, then keep this in mind for when he does get into the school age and everything. And yes, I do think it is ideal to let them have their tool. And I've heard this argument before, well, if we let them have it, aren't they going to need it forever? And that's not necessarily the case. So if your child is young, especially in the school age setting, I don't know if anybody can remember back to when you were a child and thinking about how you dealt with stressful situations or not getting your way, your emotions. I mean, you see any 2-year-old child crying because they got the wrong colored sucker or lollipop. It's just because at that young age, you don't have the coping mechanisms yet to help deal with these things. You don't have the skills that you need. And at this young age, it's difficult to teach those skills until they're a little bit older, until they have a little bit more understanding that they can control these outward reactions to their emotions and everything. So especially while they're this young, I would say yes, let them have their toy, let them have that comfort. And as they get older and they're a little bit more understanding that they have more control over their actions and that getting the red lollipop over the blue lollipop really isn't going to ruin their whole day. Once they get to that point of, the higher level thinking and processing and things like that, that's when you kind of want to start to wean them off of their comfort. And the biggest thing is the social appropriateness of it. So I've seen, I've been to work before in a classroom, and you see an adult in college sitting there, just clicking their pen or tapping it or tapping their foot or fidgeting. That is a sensory thing. That is they are seeking that input to help them regulate and stay focused, or, nervous energy, that it's the same thing. But nobody is going to go up to that adult and be like, unless it's extremely disruptive, which it can be. But, you know what I mean? So adults sometimes find these coping mechanisms too. And as a child, you don't have access to it. So if you're given that coping mechanism and you're allowed to have it and use it, then hopefully when they're older, they can wean off of it a little bit or find a more appropriate way to deal with that. I have an example of a child that I see who does carry around a clicky pen at all times, because he knows that is just knowing that is available to him if he needs it kind of helps him stay regulated. And when he's walking around in classroom or the hallway and he's carrying a pen, no one's going to be like, what's that weird toy he has? Just a pen. So as they get older, you can try and replace it with something more socially appropriate, or, ideally wean them off of it. But as a young child, I don't think, he's going to get teased or bullied or picked on for having a cool light-up toy or something like that, or carrying something through the grocery store that's going to help him stay regulated. And then once he does reach school age, that is up to the teacher, the professionals working with him, what they will allow and what they deem is appropriate to be able to have in the classroom, things like that. But I really wouldn't start worrying about that becoming a lifelong thing or used as a crutch for a very long time until the child is much older, even, getting toward the end of primary school type of age for that child. Definitely when they're that young, and they don't have the ability to regulate their emotions as much, especially these poor kids with these sensory issues. I mean, you have to think of it, there is a constant storm going on inside their body that they can't explain it, they can't describe it to you, but they can feel it, and they don't know how to fix it. And if you know of a tool or a toy that can help them fix it, you can make a world of difference just in their day-to-day and in their life, being able to regulate and feel normal and typical, and then having to deal with, the 2 and 3 year old emotional reactions that come on top of that. That's where you spiral into the major tantrums that people describe that can go on for hours and hours because they just cannot regulate themselves and come down from those emotions that they're experiencing because of that. So I hope that was helpful. If there was any, I know that was a lot. If there's any part of that question I didn't understand or that I missed, let me know. I'm going to take a little sip of my tea, and I'm going to give you guys like another minute, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. And if you tuned in late, this will be posted to the Raising Beautiful Little Minds YouTube page, I believe. And then eventually, I have a pretty demanding work schedule right now between children's clinic and the hospital. So my eventual goal is to put the answers to all of these questions up as individual videos so people don't have to search through an hour and a half of footage to find the answer to a question that they're looking for. As to when exactly that's going to happen is just going to depend on my work schedule and things like that. But follow me on Facebook. It's OT Steph, right over here. Nope, right there. Follow me on YouTube. These things are sure to come. If they are a bit slow to pop up, forgive me, but I'm sure they will be popping up soon. So give me a follow, give me a subscribe, so that, once I do get my butt moving a little bit, you guys will be notified. Well, thank you guys, too. I appreciate you guys coming here and joining us and watching me, even if you didn't ask questions, even if you just wanted to listen in and get some advice, that's absolutely fine. I will be doing this again next Saturday, same time, same place. We tried to do this on YouTube last week, and it didn't seem like it reached enough people, so I believe we're going to stick with Facebook, but I'm sure there will be some notifications for you guys during the week of exactly where and when you can tune in and ask questions. And these are all great questions. Any question is a great question. The occupational therapy scope doesn't reach, all ends of the universe or anything. But even if there's a question you're not sure if it's just ask it anyways, and I'll let you know if that's not within my field, if that's not within my scope of knowledge. I'll try and figure out who you could go to ask, or maybe, I work very closely with speech therapists and physical therapists, and it wouldn't take much effort for me during the week to kind of pose your question as a hypothetical and see what input they have and come back and share it with you the next week. So, no question is a stupid question. I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Even if I don't have the answer to them, I will be honest with you and just let you know and see if I can help you out the best that I can. But, I think that's it. I think we are wrapping it up. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. This is OT Steph, and I am currently streaming from Raising Beautiful Little Minds Facebook page. If you found this helpful at all, share it around. Let your friends know. I will be doing this again next Saturday, same times. Believe it's the same place. Tell them to bring their questions or just come and watch if they want to. I look forward to doing this again. I have a lot of fun, and it's very fulfilling to me knowing that I helped somebody. So as long as you guys are here and want the help, then I will be here, and I will be more than happy to share with you what I can to help in any way possible. But thank you for tuning in again, and you have a good week. I will see you next week. Bye.